Welcome everyone, I'm the Hero, and today we're gonna be talking about the first-person horror RPG Call of Cthulhu. The game was developed by Cyanide and published by Focus Home Interactive in October of 2018 for PC, Xbox One and PS4, then a year later for Nintendo Switch as well. The game was initially being developed by Frogwares but got given to Cyanide during Focus Home Interactive and Frogwares' messy divorce period. The game follows war veteran and Private Dick Edward Pierce on a case to find out what truly happened to the Hawkins family on Blackwater Island in Prohibition-era America. While Blackwater may seem like a run-of-the-mill xenophobic island colony at first, it doesn't take long until you see through the cracks in the charade as Pierce's nightmares play out before his eyes in the real world. Now, to talk about the quality of the story, while it can be confusing at times, this confusion is kind of part of the story as well, because of game mechanics we'll come back to in a second, as well as the world the game is set in. The story has 4 endings. What you get depends on what you did and said during your playthrough. None of the endings are particularly satisfying, but this is the Cthulhu mythos. None of them should be. This being an adaptation of the board game, it borrows mechanics and tries to make them make sense in the game's context. Of course, character building is a thing, and I even sort of grew to like some of its limitations by the end, because while you are only able to upgrade occultism and medicine by skill books, the books are plentiful. The game also has a sanity meter, which is a number in the original. And while it does work how it should for the most part, and is affected by your actions, I wish that you could actually choose between being sane and not seeing visions, and being insane and getting shit on more but potentially being able to survive more easily, as it was in the board game. As it is, going by the game's descriptions of the traumas and what the levels are, I don't see it likely that it's implemented to that extent, which does limit your options in the story a bit. So really the sanity meter in this game is less of a checkup on your mental well-being and more of a how much of the game is left meter. Otherwise, the game's gameplay mostly consists of examining items and clues as well as speaking to people, which makes it not too dissimilar to Telltale's games or Frogwares' Sherlock Holmes games, which in hindsight makes a lot of sense. The game's puzzles are mostly fine. The only one I remember having an issue with was the fight against the Dimensional Shambler, in which you have to choose a specific dagger from a room full of daggers to hit a painting with. There's also some level-specific mechanics the game introduces to go with the usual speaking and touching things as well as the slightly less frequent but still usual stealth gameplay. These mechanics can be things like switching between multiple color-coded realities to progress through the level, or having a gun with limited ammo while surrounded by potentially innocent zombie people that would like to consume your flesh. The game features 2 sources of light for you to use in dark places, a lighter that may as well not exist past a certain point, and a hurricane light that you'll want to use initially but also becomes more of a burden to use than not, both because of its own reserves diminishing, and also because it emits a large amount of light, and emitting light while doing stealth is probably not the best idea. The stealth mechanic works in sometimes confusing ways, by which I mean that it doesn't seem to make a difference whether you're in the shadows or not. You will be detected at the same rate if you're in the view cone of the enemies. This is something that can be worked around, so it doesn't really make a big difference. I just noticed it while playing and thought it worthy to bring up. But speaking of mechanics being confusing, I'm not sure why we needed the shoot gun button to be not just the right trigger but also A, because it can potentially lead to things like this.
How many died because of this madness?
And because things like this can lead to you wanting to reload, let's talk about loading times. While reloading checkpoints is relatively fast, loading into each chapter can be a bit of a slog, clocking in at around 25 minutes overall. While I do appreciate the flavor text explaining some stuff the game wants you to know or remind you of, at times it did feel like I was waiting more than playing the game. The game also features dialogue choices, since it is an RPG. The choices you get depend on your stats, the clues you've found, and how bonkers you are at that part of the story, giving you the first line of dialogue Pierce says and giving the developers less lines to voice. As you get deeper, you will also get the option to speak Riehen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I assume the options you get make sense if you can read this, but I can't so. To move on to sounds and graphics, the game has some environment drawing issues when quickly turning or moving that only occurs for a second or so but is consistent enough for it to be noticeable. As well as sound issues that I've never seen in a video game before. I'm not quite sure what causes it, but the game has an issue with dialogue either resetting or messing around with the ambient sounds and soundtrack. It's like they wanted to do auto-ducking at first but then decided not to use it after all and forgot to remove it completely. The sounds during and after dialogue lines are usually fine, but a lot of times the backing tracks so the dialogue cuts out or becomes really quiet when the game is cueing the dialogue's audio.
His perfusion of a semi-physiological solution doesn't seem to work. He's undergoing a ventricular fibrillation. Nurse? Deborah, come and help me, please. His potassium level is too high. Replace it with 2% glucose solution with insulin, calcium, and sodium bicarbonate.
I'll tend to it right away.
The game's loose thinking can also leave something to be desired.
Oh, that evidence exists. I'm sure of it. I need to find the missing medical files.
And where would you find those? In his office. What if you get caught?
I'd rather not think about that. I'm counting on your discretion.
Of course, Doctor. You can count on me. I'll keep Mum.
Aside from those, I didn't find too many issues with the graphics or sound because the game was made by a smallish studio and all that, and the voice acting, ambient noise, and soundtracks were fine for the most part. So, in conclusion, Call of Cthulhu is not for everyone, and does have numerous issues, but none of the issues are game-breaking and you can still play the game fine and have fun with it, even if the bugs in the presentation make it less than stellar. I'm not exactly sure if this game is deserving of being the official Call of Cthulhu game, but it does stay true to the mythos as far as I can tell, and they mostly adapted the board game, even if it was with arguably more artistic liberty than they should have. Overall, I enjoyed my time with the game and it did succeed at unnerving me a number of times throughout my playthrough. I hope you enjoyed this video, and with that, goodbye.